session. Alrighty. So like Motsa said, I will be just giving like a reflection of what happened last session and what is to come. So we held our first session on the 23rd of March, and there were about 54 participants that took part in the COP. So the main idea, or the first reflection or initial idea of having the first COP, was to launch and articulate the vision for the COP and provide an overview of the latest MERL tech landscape trends in Africa and find out from members what their preferred format of engagement would be and which topics they would be interested in. We got quite a few responses. So when time goes on, we are going to try and see if we are still hitting the nail in addressing some of these topics that you're interested in. So the engagements that we currently have open, we have we'll share the links on the group or on the chat. We have a WhatsApp group open. We also have a Slack channel that you can join in, but you are very welcome to keep checking out our LinkedIn page for any updates. I think Samia is the main page that is sharing, but there are other individuals like myself who are constantly sharing updates on anything happening tech-enabled related. Another very exciting opportunity, or I think an opportunity that we have gotten is we have gotten funding, even though it isn't much, but it's just a startup to get us into a momentum where we can get other activities going, and some of these is something that we'll be able to share when time goes on. So I don't know if there is anything, I don't know if there's anything that I am missing, but thank you so much for joining the session, and I hope that you will be intrigued and have fun during this time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Viwe. I hope you can all see my screen. Just to briefly share the agenda for today, we've got, as I mentioned, 5 panelists, and so we're going to kick off with 3 of them sharing. Solomon is going to start us off, and then Abhijit, and then Sean, and then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A session before we take a tea break. After that, we'll come back and hear from Alex and Steve, and I'll introduce them rightfully as we go along. At the end of our session, we'd like to spend a little bit of time networking. So I am going to be pretty hard on time to our speakers. I apologize for being a little bit rude in advance. And hopefully we'll get enough from them to kick off some interesting discussions in those rooms. What I'm going to do now as well is acknowledge the co-hosts that we have today. We are joined by our first speaker. Solomon comes from the Monitoring and Evaluation Practitioners Association of Kenya, and it's wonderful to finally be at a place where we're collaborating with you guys and on this fresh topic. We're also joined and co-hosted by MERL Tech. It's good to see Linda here. And MERL Tech actually already has an NLP COP, which is what, if you heard my conversation with Nicholas earlier, that's what we were talking about. So there's a lot of exciting developments going on there, and that also offers us a platform to collaborate with everybody who's hosted there. Some of them are here today. Thanks for joining us. And I see Tikwiza and Asgar, some of our Samia board members. Tikwiza is our Samia chair. Welcome, and thank you for joining us and your support. We're particularly excited about the funding. So thanks for your support with getting this COP going. And yay, I see a party, a party emoji. We're very excited. I'm gonna introduce our first panelist. So Solomon Gitao is from the Evaluation Society in Kenya, as I mentioned earlier, and today he's going to be talking to us about satellite imagery analysis applications of NLP in MERL. And just to give you a little bit of an intro to who he is, he's the managing director at Ngirigaka Solutions, which is a consultancy firm offering GIS development, mapping, remote sensing, and M&E services in the agricultural sector. He has been the firm's lead trainer in GIS development and in mapping projects. He's a trained land survey and mapping, strategic management and leadership, and an M&E professional with over 6 years of experience. His land survey and mapping expertise has enabled him to provide clients with accurate and reliable data, which has been essential in improving their decision-making processes. Through his strategic management skills, he's helped Ngirigaka Solutions establish itself as a reputable consultancy firm, providing customized solutions to meet clients' needs. He's also recently presented a talk at the G Local Summit that happened recently. So he has a little bit of a head start on his content today, but we're glad to have him here to share his experiences. Solomon, I will hand over to you, please. You are welcome.
There's a thing by him also saying that he has lost you, but I'm assuming everybody can still hear you. It's just him. Maybe we just need to check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. Let me just give it a moment, see if I can. Let me type here. I could see him earlier, but I think he's struggling a bit with the connection. Hi, Solomon.
Can you maybe try leaving the meeting and joining in? I think that should eventually solve the problem.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. And in the meantime, he's struggled a bit actually. He's been trying to join on and off since about 2. So let's give it a while. Abhijit, would you be okay to present first, please? You are next on our schedule.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, sure. And I'll introduce you too. So thanks for joining us, Abhijit. Abhijit's joining us from MERL Tech. That's where we found him, but he is based in India, and he is the founder of Ekatra. Abhijit's work is multifarious in nature, spans inclusive innovation, space research, and entrepreneurship. He's an award-winning innovation by World Economic Forum and funded by Deloitte Global. Ekatra, which he founded, is a tool for educators and organizations to deliver learning at scale, combining the power of text through SMS and WhatsApp, audio, and video communication. Ekatra helps organizations focused on career readiness for underserved high schoolers to teach them essential jobs and life skills. So his talk today will focus on AI for education. Abhijit, over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm going to share something that I actually spoke about. We have been, like India has been hosting the G20 summit here this time around, and I quite I was invited to share about my work there as well. So I have pretty much the same presentation that I'm going to share with you folks.
Am I audible? Am I audible from your end?
Okay, I think we have Solomon back. Solomon, are you there? Solomon, are you able to speak with us, or should I continue?
I can hear you well. It's Musa. I'm losing. But I think you can start.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you can go. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sure. So just adding on.
I'm losing Musa, but
I'm sorry, I missed that. Sure. Just getting back on what Mr. shared. So I try to also introduce myself as a field academic turned entrepreneur. And these are some places there where I have like a couple of my entrepreneurial ventures in the past, and places that my work has been featured in recent past. I primarily run this nonprofit called Vriksh, which does entrepreneurship education awareness programs in Southeast Asia. Just going to talk, like, quickly give you a brief background on that. We primarily do learning initiatives, work with larger CSOs and private organizations on program implementation, and run a community of social entrepreneurs across South Asia. One of the key initiatives that we do is build technology that helps scale our work across these sectors. These were some of the impact numbers that we've achieved in the past 5 years. And during the pandemic, we realized that digital learning is broken. Like every organization out there who's working with people offline, we tried to use online mediums and learned that only 5% of our beneficiaries were able to join online video sessions. And that really pushed us to action. And then, the natural progression was to use WhatsApp, wherein there's about 50% engagement, but still that was not enough. And so we moved to using SMS and audio. And that was something that clicked. So where we took the attendance rates to about 80%. And that helped us realize that, going from 5 to 80%, I think we need to use some of these tools and technologies. And that is where Ekatra was born. Ekatra today helps organizations, educators deploy micro-learning programs. It works in this way, where you have like a front end, which is like a chatbot of sorts across different messaging applications. The admins use web LMS system, wherein they can see analytics and upload content and build courses and all of that. And plus we have an NLP system wherein we use this to interact with information for the educators and students at the same time. To give like a brief block view of how this technology works is, an educator would put in the content, the AI helps in summarization, translation, and then pushes across these channels. The learner receives them, and then if they have any questions, the AI again kicks into action, wherein we use sentiment analysis and semantic search to answer these queries. There's also a no data solution that we've built, wherein which is powered by Colibri, and wherein we are able to deploy high quality learning programs without the need of internet at the grassroots level. A lot of this AI technology works on top of GPT, and multiple LLMs that we've experimented with. So I spoke a part of this, like day before yesterday at the MERL discussion on using GPT for custom knowledge sources. Happy to share the presentation also with the audience here, wherein the system basically interacts across a knowledge base and communicates to the user across, again, any sorts of messaging apps. And this happens in vernacular languages across text and audio as well. The way that people have been using a solution is primarily for employee learning, wherein if you've people have organizations with distributed staff use this to teach their audience, or for customer education to provide useful education content around your product, or by mostly CSOs who use it for awareness initiatives or government programs who want to disseminate information at scale in a conversational manner. Some of these things that we've run in the past, and just numbers to say how it has been successful, is we've had about 28,000 learners so far. Our best rates have been about 75%, which is really, really wonderful. And all of this is built on research by around microlearning that has happened at Stanford and Michigan. These are some of the programs that we've run in the past, wherein these are entrepreneurship programs, or we've also built something called Ask YC, wherein we trained the UI, the NLP on YC's YouTube content, and then it could respond for entrepreneurs across questions that they have. Then this is something that we built for Catalyst 2030, which is a nonprofit initiative coalition of social innovators across the globe, where we're building the solution for nonprofits and to use and understand the system in a much better way. Now, all of this, there's a deep-rooted inspiration for me. This young person out there, his name is Gaurav. He comes from a very small town in India, and he built a tool for he built a tool for scaring away farm animals because he saw that problem. As his parents are daily wage earners in the farm, and he went through our entire learning program on through the pandemic, and he built his own micro enterprise and is now thriving with that, which makes me feel that if a technology like this that can change this one person's life in a much more meaningful way helps me believe that this is something that can impact a lot more people, and which keeps me thriving day in, day out to build on top of it. Talking a little about the future, because everyone is talking about AI now, the way that I see this growing is education will be hyper-personalized, highly interactive, and real-time. And our first step in that direction is called Alfred, wherein we've been able to build a completely autonomous learning solution, wherein you could just type in subject, your preference in terms of how you want to learn it, if it's in a casual manner, in a professional manner, what language you want to learn it, and it builds a 3-day learning plan for you, and and you receive it every day, where you can learn about the specific topic over 10-15 minutes in a day. And plus we've also added voice interaction, so you could just simply send a voice note and it responds back to you. And at the end of the program, you get a fancy certificate that you can show off. That is something that I've learned. And that's that's the future that I personally look forward and I am building for it. And I would love for you to try it out. The big goal and vision in this initiative is to reach 1 billion learners in the next 5 years. And I invite anyone and everyone who's interested in this space to come and support us. We are a completely open source solution. So if you want to build on top of it and distribute in your own communities, please feel free to do that. This is it. So if you use WhatsApp by any chance and want to try the solution out, you can pull out your phone, scan this, and let me know about the feedback. I hope I was on time, Mutsa.
Perfectly on time. Thanks, Abhijit. That was very interesting. It's such an interesting solution because during COVID, one of the struggles that people in low resource contexts experienced was obviously that you can't use Zoom if you don't have network connectivity, but students will have phones and they can access, WhatsApp with relatively low amounts of data. So that presents a solution to that. And that's exciting. It's exciting to see that it's also had such a great uptake. Thanks very much for sharing, Abhijit.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are going to move on to our next speaker. If you have any questions, please be posting questions in the chat. And please be specific about who the question is for, unless it is a general question. And as we move on, we're going to try again. Solomon, can you hear us? Can you hear me? No, I can't hear you, but I can see you. Okay.
Can you get me now?
Yes, it's very faint. We'll have to speak a bit louder.
The voice is down.
Almost there.
Almost there.
Now we are
I can
there.
shout. I can shout a little bit. Yeah, I think apologies for the interruption. I'm actually in the office and such things sometimes do happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the sound is a bit staggered. It's not very smooth.
Hope you can see my screen. Confirm.
Yes, we can see your screen.
What about the sound now?
We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
I think it is, I'm working from the boardroom. So I've left the main room to comfortably present from here.
Okay.
So how many minutes am I? How many minutes?
10 minutes, and I will flag you when your 10 minutes is running out, when you have 1 minute left.
Okay, so sir, thank you. I think I have up to 10 hours to complete. Okay, thank you. I think I have already been introduced, though it wasn't clear from my end. So I just start by saying that generally, as Grigasha Solutions, I think you have talked of Grigaka. It is Grigasha Solutions Limited. We are working on a system, monitoring and evaluation systems, where we can be able to analyze on qualitative data. But more specifically, we are trying to work with the existing platform instead of having to create our own systems. Because I think we have quite a number which are in place, and we are trying more to understand what other people's platform can offer in terms of qualitative data analysis. So in case I can see one of our presenter here has got a software or a platform that can be used for qualitative data analysis, this is a good opportunity. We can partner and see what we can be able to do out of that. But for myself, generally, I'll be able to present on now basically on the natural language processing and AI, and that is the application of monitoring evaluation data analysis. So, and this one we shall be looking in the context of advancing technology in terms of data, qualitative data analysis. So just start by talking about this qualitative data. As you are aware, it's quite of about numerical or something that don't have that figures. You can be able to do some kind of calculation. So an example of such kind of qualitative data is some kind of data you get from the focus group discussions. Those are the open-ended questions. The one you get from the field notes, like that one done from by the media people. They have the audio and video recording. We also have the survey with open-ended questions. Just you can get some of them from the focus group. We have the review comprehended as chat messages, the such a kind of interactions, the customer interviews, case notes, and social media context, that the comments that you get maybe from social media like the Facebook or the Twitter. So when we talk of qualitative data analysis, you want to try to look what is that qualitative analysis, and for our case, we usually have the intention of trying to make sense of data, and that for using decision making. As usually in monitoring evaluation, we usually try to look for is it what we are doing, the program, the project we are implementing, is it heading to the right direction? And this way we want to make some informed decision. So the reason why we usually look at how it is important is like for the example of the supermarket suggestion box. So is it that this supermarket also is making good progress, or in which direction are we heading to? Some of these supermarkets in my area, I have one which has got the provision for digital comments. So you just type anything and you share through an SMS. So at times you get to get some work to analyze such of kind of suggestion and comment from the customers. So the other way you are going to look at is important is describing the characteristics of qualities, like if they are selling some kind of misfra, how do you talk about it? How is it? The other thing is to provide like the context of responses, like are these customers, are they in terms of complaining, are they commending, or are they proposing some kind of advancement or a better way of doing things? So the other kind is of identifying them kind of trend and pattern. And when you talk of trend and pattern, like we do in security imagery analysis, we try to look into how was it like in 1985, how was it around 2005, 2015, and so we look at the kind of trend. Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? And if so, is it maybe that is in terms of the time? Is it increasing, decreasing, or in the coverage? How is the coverage? Is it decreasing or increasing? So the other thing is assembling data in a meaningful fashion. For example, we are doing something on that supermarket, and we are trying to look, is it that some kind of comment, we try to interpret what do actually do they mean. And in this way, we are able to use simple softwares like even MS1. We try to code. If someone saying this, we try to look. If someone said some kind of certain kind of word, we try to code them to a certain meaning. Meaning they have some kind of same meaning. And also some of the kind of challenges we face on this one in this data is the overwhelming amount of data. Yes.
We are not seeing the slides moving.
Okay, I'm the same slide.
interrupt.
I haven't moved. The same
Okay.
slide.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm actually on the rightmost side. This is the kind of the amount of data that we receive, and is there a large volume? We usually have some kind of trouble in try to decoding information out of that amount of data. The other thing is about the subjectivity of that. It's open to discussion. I think the other thing is assumptions. We assume quite a lot on the data, and then we have like I've said, we need collaboration in terms of tool that you can be able to make sense out of our data. So the other thing is on artificial intelligence. So what we are saying basically is in quantitative data analysis, AI integrate natural language processing in its programming to facilitate decoding some sound, video, and word for analysis purpose. And when we talk of decoding, we are talking of analyzing and to interpret maybe a communication or image. And then the other thing is about converting the audio or the video signal into a different usable form, that is like the analog from the digital sound and reproduction. So go back there to natural language processing. Don't worry about the match text. So natural language processing is a technique that where such named entity recognitions, sentiment analysis, uses in topic modeling, text classification, and text summarization are used to automate part of a process of assigning code labels to text in quantitative data analysis. So we look at a named entity is like a real thing. Like I have taken as a packet of misfra in a supermarket is a real world object. It may either be a person, a location, organization, or a product that can be denoted with a proper name. It can be an abstract or conceptual. So, what are some of these kind of benefits we usually get from the natural language processing? So, our main thing benefit that we can summarize in summary say we do get is about the process automation, such as data extraction and decoding, including the sound and video and words. But for my case, for a company, what we do is more of in the word, the text. That is where we are much in it. So it helps us to, the way we have worked with it, it has helped us to automate the repetitive task over time. And example of how we use some of kind of these things is on hit word detection. Usually try to get insight into some comment in our site, and so by looking at such abusive word or so. So one thing we have noted is about challenge we are facing that is on human interpretation on conversation. And one thing we have noted is one kind of the most basic form of qualitative data analysis. Have I talked in the primaries when we had the meeting on the preparation? We talked about how we can be able to decode sound from one language to another. And we have tried the basic form that we use is on the individual having an interpreter between us. So these are some of the software platform we do use for our qualitative data analysis. The basic one is the Excel. We have the Word document. We have the SAPSS. So the others, we have a list there. So another special software that we use, which I got some kind of level of qualitative analysis, is number 12. That is the mapping software, including the ArcMap, the QGIS. We have the COBOL, the quality, the service ETU. They have some level of qualitative, that is the attribute data analysis. And then they have an advantage of a spatial visualization. You can be able to see in terms of location. Maybe like you are doing for a whole country or the whole country, you can be able to see the kind of distribution and realize kind of pattern and trend. So some of the limitation that we are facing is a amount of training data that you are able to use to be able to detect whether something is a hit word or so, or the kind of a comment that given by a client or a customer. We need to use a large amount of data because it is dynamic. The kind of word this person might use, the other person might not use the same, and we need to be able to tell the software that if this one, and the other one, it means the same thing. The other one, the struggle on understanding the context of data. It's a challenge we address with the first one, increasing the amount of training data. The other thing issue is on biased on the data we train on. sometimes when you come to using like the Sheng language used by the youth, it's become some kind of a challenge. Then you have the data, maybe someone wants to type a word like a dog, and then he types like a DAG. So that's kind of things. And the other thing is we cannot avoid having the human insight interpretation to validate the kind of work we are doing. And now looking at some of kind of the way we can be able to address this kind of limitation. And this one goes specifically to the people whom we use their platform, and is to
No, Solomon, now you're talking about things that I really do want to see. Maybe if
yes,
you stop sharing the slide and then
yes.
reshare, because they're still stuck.
Can't you see the slide movie?
No, it's still on the title slide. We could
The
listen up until now, but it sounds like you're not demonstrating something.
Oh,
There, okay, it moved. It moved. Yeah, with you now.
so can you be able to see from there?
Limitations and challenges, qualitative data analysis tools.
Oh, so from the word go, you didn't see?
No, we couldn't see,
You couldn't see?
but we could
Oh,
hear. We could
okay,
hear
okay,
you.
okay.
Yeah,
I think it's because I had put it in slide mode. As might be the challenge.
no problem.
Okay,
We're with you.
so I think I can proceed from there. The rest we can bring into, we can catch up in the panelist. So
Yes.
this is, I've talked about the amount of training data. That's why we have seen like the word dog, you need some kind of abusive word you might be trying to do. We needed to interpret the context of that word, how it was used. So if one misses one word or put a star in between the word D and G, so these are kind of problem you want to have, and you need to code your work so that they be able to detect it, mean the same thing. So the other thing is about the issue of having the human in the interpretation data. You cannot avoid having someone who go and validate the kind of work you have done, and that means an additional cost. So however you are going to use the natural language processing and the AI, we still need to have some human input, so that to be able to validate such kind of work. So this is about addressing the limitation, as I have said, the issue of human insight into the interpretation. We need to validate. The other thing is the amount of training data. We need to train our algorithm in the diverse and repetitive data set, so that you can be able to, actually, we keep on adding the coding each and every day to detect new version of the same word or same meaning. So the other thing is working in conjunction with other qualitative research methods. So sometimes we have a team of 2 or 3. So one uses this platform and the other one uses another platform. But we want to compare the end result. Are we having the same or are they diverse? And sometimes is when we get different results, though the deviation is actually around 5 to 10%, which we need to be minimized. But usually we have the input of people to look into that. The other one is review researchers. So I think I can go to conclusion. So summary of the key point from the interaction with the AI and the natural language processing. So a natural language processing can be used to in sound and word or text, and the same as video extraction and decoding, and to get meaningful information out of it. So for sound and video extraction, I think it is quite at a young age, though we have some software which are trying to come up recently. As you have seen in the table, we also have the word extraction is the most basic that we are able to use with the available platform we have. We are able to code some word and do kind of scripting, querying The other thing is natural language processing analysis should always be reviewed and validated by human researcher to ensure their validity. So it's about the future direction for the research. One of them, like a general thing, is the need for partnership. Some such kind of presentation we might not be able to show much based on our schedule and the way how busy maybe we are, and even to prepare this kind of thing, noting the position we hold. But one thing is about content and be able to do some practical kind of demonstration with the specific softwares. So you also have the researcher needed to address the bias in natural language processing and AI analysis. So this is where we have the different platform analyzing the same kind of data and having the different result. And maybe it's the same I'm saying, we usually have different of between 5 to 15% deviation. And the other thing is we can now explore on the new application of natural language processing, like analyzing social media data or online review. And the last one is the impact on NLP and AI on validity and reliability of qualitative data analysis. Is so far it's quite a good move. And I think, Musa, I can stop at that point unless there is a question at the end.
Thank you very much, Solomon. We will have questions after Sean's segment, but this was very interesting. And if there are questions, please do type questions in the chat. I think we hear often about the challenges around needing larger data sets or the needs for human interaction or interpretation of what we are finding, the challenges around labeling costs. And I think a lot of the time people hear these challenges as deterrents, but it's nice to hear how these are opportunities for people to get involved and kind of further the work. So thank you for sharing that, Solomon. Okay, we have our third and last panelist for this segment. Before we move into a very brief Q&A, we're going to hear from Sean Walsh. Sean Walsh is from within our own circles here at SAMEA. He's a SAMEA member and part of the tech-enabled MERL membership as well. He's a software developer with 25 years of experience, and he's worked predominantly in the public sector and for NGOs, being a strong advocate of information and communication technologies for development. He's recently been building an open source monitoring and evaluation system called Monic, which I believe is available on GitHub. And he's going to tell us how he's using the ChatGPT API with questionnaires in Monic. You're welcome, Sean. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mutsa. I'm sharing my screen, so it should start coming through now. Just can I get a...
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, great. Thanks for that introduction. So what I'm going to do, it's like a very basic demo of the work that we did recently for National Treasury. So it's a hands-on demo. I don't have any slides, but the project was to do a capacity assessment of all the municipalities in South Africa to see how to evaluate their capacity for administering development or levying development charges. Development charges being where the municipality places a charge on property developers in order to provide some of the services. So what we had to do was create a questionnaire, which we created in Monic, this open source tool that Mutsa has mentioned. And this is what the questionnaire looked like. It's kind of like what you would see with Kobo Toolbox or any one of those online questionnaire tools. It has sections, capability to levy charges, and then a bunch of questions like 1.1, does your municipality require DCs? And this question had a yes, no, maybe answer. 1.2, Give me a second. I think something has not loaded correctly. 1.2, rate your level of familiarity. Another 4 rating scale with 4 options. 4 options. So just rating scales. There's some skip logic built in, but eventually we get to kind of like an open-ended question. How often does the body selected in the previous question meet? Now, this question probably could have been a closed-ended one, but wasn't. How many building development applications are processed per quarter? How are they being processed and approved, and so on. So you get the idea that we distributed this to all 257 municipalities, and not all have completed it yet. But what we wanted to do then was start using NLP or specifically ChatGPT to process the answers, to summarize the answers, because we're a little bit lazy. So if we can get a tool to do it for us, then fantastic. So what we did is I took the data and I fed it into the ChatGPT API. And what you have to do is, so some people will know this, it's very basic ChatGPT stuff, but you have to give it kind of like a context. So you have to say, you have to tell it what kind of role it must fulfill. So you're a helpful assistant that summarizes responses to the questions from a questionnaire that was distributed, blah, blah, blah. And then here's me saying what the question is. This is the first question, does your municipality require DCs? And then the list of options were yes, no, maybe. And then 80 municipalities responded, their answers are, and then I used the municipality codes to track the answers here. And I sent that all off. Please analyze and summarize the answers that were given. So ChatGPT came back and said, of the 80 municipalities that responded to the questionnaire, 66 said that they require, 9 said that they don't, and 5 said maybe. So that's great, because this takes a lot of effort away from researchers that just want that summary produced for them, and then they can move on to more important things. However, what we found was that if you look at the 5 municipalities that said maybe, if I go back up here and go down through these results here, you'll see that there's a maybe, there's a second maybe, 3, 4, 5. Oh, hang on, that's not right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there should be a 7th somewhere. 7. So I missed 2 on my first count. So there were actually 7 maybes, and ChatGPT just kind of made it up and said, oh, there's 5. So I said, well, which 5 responded maybe? And it says, okay, these 5. And I said, well, what about DC 222? And ChatGPT says, oh, apologies for that. Yeah, DC 222 said maybe too. So, this was a bit of a challenge for us, because you kind of expect that when there's kind of no right, when there's a right and a wrong answer, or one right answer, you expect like a machine, an AI, to give that to you. And when, I almost assume that for the open-ended questions, it would be more dubious, more iffy, the answers that it gave, and for the closed-ended ones, it would be accurate. But it wasn't the case at all. So what we had to do was, let me just check. So we then we had to restructure how we sent the data to ChatGPT. And I'll show you now how we do that. So if I come into the questionnaire here, and I go to the analysis tab and I load question 1.1, which is the one that we've just looked at. And I load the analysis. So here you can see that here are the answers, 64 yes, 11 no, and 7 maybe. So this is a little bit later. That earlier demo was taken a few weeks ago. And there's no summary in here. So what we wanted to do, working with the API, so the automated way of working with ChatGPT, is we wanted to build in an interface with the website with Monic, so that you could actually say, okay, generate for 1.1. I want to generate for 1.1 2023. I want you to generate an answer to this, a summary to the options. So this is going off now and interacting with ChatGPT, and then it comes back. And if I reload this analysis, here it says what we've got back. Okay, so this is what comes back through the API. It's like the same process as doing it through the ChatGPT website, but it's doing it in a way that you can automate. And you can see here that 82 total, and the results were 64, 11, and 7. So 64, 11, and 7. So how did we get the right answer there? Well, what we had to do was actually kind of do some pre-processing on our side, and actually feed the data in an aggregated way. So this is effectively the text that gets sent through to ChatGPT's API. So very similarly, we give it the kind of context, the role that it needs to play. We say what the question is, and then we give it we actually do the counts on our side and say 82 municipalities provided responses, and there were 64, 11, and 7. So it's not as exciting as you'd think, because we're kind of doing a lot of this work ourselves beforehand, right? But that at least helped it to, now we can actually just kind of like generate these, almost send them like an aggregation of the numbers and have it generate a much nicer text here. So, you know, if we just give it the totals by the different options, then it can give us the kind of text that we can then embed into reports and whatnot. Okay, so that was a close-ended question. It actually was much more useful for the open-ended question. So if I come down to 1.6a, how often does the body in the selected previous question meet? Well, actually, let's do 1.6c. How are building applications processed and approved? And if I load that, there's currently no summary, so I have to go generate the summary. So 1.6c, select checked, and for 2023. Okay, so I'm going to generate a question based on the open-ended question here. And if I click this show answers, let me just click the show answers button. These were the answers that came through in that open-ended question. So, you know, you can see someone just put 1,200, others wrote like a long answer. So we got a variety of different answers that came through, and ChatGPT has generated this response. Thank you for providing the information. Based on the responses, it appears that building and development applications are processed or approved in various ways across different municipalities. The majority of municipalities have internal departments that review and assess applications for compliance with regulations and laws, and some applications are referred to municipal planning track. So this is, I think, much better than we initially got on the close-ended side, and it's kind of a lot more useful. But I'd like to just say, like, echoing what Solomon concluded with in the previous presentation, is that you need to actually go and review and validate this. A human should actually go and review and validate this, because if there are limitations to the technology, you're not going to know that it's kind of missed, you know, got the counts wrong or something else unless you're checking it. That being said, it is being improved over time, and I initially wanted to actually generate the incorrect answer for you, but when I tried to do it again today, it came back with the correct answers, even if I gave it like just without doing the aggregation. So obviously they have tweaked something in ChatGPT, and it's getting better and better, and doesn't seem, you know, they're ironing out those mistakes. So what I wanted to do next is just show you a little bit more about generating, working with the API. So as you've seen, I can select the questions that I want to generate, and I need to say which year of data collection it's in. But then when you're working with the API, you have a couple of parameters that you supply to the API. First is the maximum number of tokens that you want to use. So the API charges you per token that you use, and the pricing is over here on ChatGPT's OpenAI's website, where they say for ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the one I'm using, it's 50.15 US cents per 1,000 tokens, and ChatGPT 4 is 0.3 cents, so a lot more expensive. And they charge you for what you send to it, and then also for what it gives you back, so the input and the output costs. How do you know what a token is? Well, there is this tokenizer on OpenAI's website, and if I go to a let's say this text that I submitted and I pasted in here. So if I'm sending this query to ChatGPT, it generates, it shows you the number of tokens that it uses at the bottom here, and it's almost a token per word. So this is 168 tokens. So then you can do something like calculate 168 tokens, and on ChatGPT-4, at that cost per 1,000, it comes out as effectively 10 South African cents, or half a US cent. And ChatGPT 3.5 is significantly less. So, you know, that's super cheap, but when you're running kind of hundreds of these things, you might want to kind of get an estimate. It's a way of working out what your cost is going to be. And then the system message, you can customize this in Monarch. So you basically tell it, you first give ChatGPT the system message, and you say, this is the role that you need to play for me. And then a user prompt. So the user prompt is the interaction that you do, and you can do repetitively after you do the system message. But here it's basically saying, please analyze and summarize the answers to the question. And then there's a placeholder here where the question text goes in, and then there's a placeholder here for the answers. This one gets used for text and multi-line text, but then it needs to be slightly different for when there's closed-ended questions where we're actually doing that aggregation, which might not be needed anymore. But basically, Monarch will take this and it will substitute in the answer counts and the various options in there. Sorry, the one thing I forgot to mention is temperature. Temperature is kind of like the amount of creativity you want ChatGPT to use, and it ranges from 0 to 1. So 0 should be kind of very bland, like non-creative, and then 1 should be like very creative. So I did this earlier, and with a temperature of 0.01, you can see that here it's kind of like just listing the municipalities and the answers. It's not being very creative in how it generates the answer. But on temperature 1, which is the maximum, with the same input, it gives me a shorter kind of summarized version where it's actually doing more interpretation. So temperature in this kind of NLP processing of answers isn't super useful, or it might not be super useful, but when you ask it to do creative things like write a short story for you with certain characters, you know, you can get very like wildly different responses if you increase the temperature. But that's all I wanted to show in this demo, is just our experience of working with ChatGPT, and that, you know, there are these pitfalls and consider issues that you need to be aware of, but it's such a young technology that I think it's just going to keep on improving. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sean. That was very interesting. Yeah, I did not know that I had to tell ChatGPT what role I wanted to play whenever I ask a question, so that's useful to know. Also, we are probably responsible for why it can't count, because we can't count. So the blind eating the blind, perhaps. That was really interesting. I know there's a lot of questions probably in the audience, and so I'd like to use a couple of minutes now for that. There was a question earlier posed to Abhijit, I think it was you, Sean, asking how you can get ChatGPT to be familiar with your knowledge base or your context so that it can answer questions that are related to your organization. That's, I imagine, a lot more than just saying, play this role. It's probably a little bit more in-depth than that. Abhijit, would you be comfortable to answer that, please?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much for this question. I think for interacting custom data, there are several repositories that are out there. There's an open source solution that we've built. I'm happy to share some of the links to our GitHub that you can implement. To share a brief in terms of how the process works is you first, there are two modes rather. One is where you provide it with context. And the second is where you do fine tuning. The context part works in a manner that, as Sean shared a little while back, you give it a context that, you are a helpful assistant and you have to respond using the given text only. And if you don't have an information in the text, then you will respond as I don't know. And this is something also shared day before in the MERL COP. And then give the context of the document itself, which then serves as an entire prompt to the GPT engine, and then it responds with a corresponding, like, a specific answer. Now, if in case you have multiple documents or large documents, there's a process called vectorization, where what happens is, because the context window of GPT, like for 3.5, has now been extended to 16K. GPT-4 is about 4K. So let's still consider 4K, which is 4K tokens corresponds to approximately 2,800 words, I would say. And given within that context, so you cannot maybe fill a 10-page or 20-page document in that context. And it also at the same time becomes expensive. So what happens in vectorization is you first do a data cleaning of whatever documents that you have and remove the extra parts, which could be headers, footers, if you're using websites, so maybe privacy policies and all of that information. Once that clean data is ready, you input that in a vector database, wherein it then splits into chunks of information. One system that we use is, first we do like a BERT process, like there's a keyword driven search. It finds out the most relevant sentences which contain that search term that you're looking out for, pulls that out, puts it in the context window, and then runs that through the GPT, and then provides you with a very specific answer to the query that you've asked. So again, there are multiple models in terms of how it gets utilized, but that's one format. I try to be a little bit technical, but happy to connect and share anyone who wants to implement or use some of these things. And the second is fine tuning, wherein if you look at, OpenAI has multiple of these products. GPT is available as an API, and ChatGPT is a fine-tuned version of that, which is available to the public. So fine-tuning involves a much deeper process, wherein the information gets trained and it then responds in a very specific manner over a certain set of information or context. And then you use it for a use case that you want to really implement. So API access will give you a very, the core functionality that you want to leverage, which is available at, through directly when you log into OpenAI. Whereas ChatGPT is an implementation of the GPT API, which is a fine-tuned version. So, I hope you understand the context of it. So those are two different ways where you can use. I would also encourage rather to play around with other LLMs that are out there. Anthropic, for that matter, has a 100K context window, which means that you can technically put in a 100-page, pretty much a 100-page document, and it can fit into one single context itself. So just comparatively, like GPT 3.5 gives you 8K, 16K, 4K context window, and Anthropic Claude implementation gives you 100K context windows. So that's the difference. You can put in a lot more information, and you don't need a vector database when you're using Anthropic.
That's great. Please share that in the chat. That last one that you mentioned, Abhijit, Anthropic, I think you said.
That's correct.
Great, thank you. I'll take one more question, and there's one here for, I think, Sean it is. Yeah, I think it would be nice actually to hear this answer out loud. So Linda's asking in the chat, I'm wondering what happens when you're working in languages other than English. Do we need to translate everything first? How well does automated translation work in less dominant languages? And is that something that is going to improve with time? How does that affect utility of these tools in MERL? Yeah, I think I'll post that one to Sean because I think you might have a use case with Kenya, Rwanda. On one.
No, we haven't actually used Monic in other countries yet. But I did have someone on the MERL Slack channel actually ask me the same thing recently, Nicholas Dickinson, where he was saying, I think they were collecting in a multilingual context where the answers could come back in either one of a number of languages. And they first had to kind of translate it and whatnot. And at the time, I was like, I'm not sure how you would do that. But then like a day or two later, I saw an event on Eventbrite that was about, which I've posted in the chat, which was about using large language models to translate between languages and what the limitations and the advantages are of that. I didn't actually attend that event, but I posted it to Nicholas to say, if you have a look at this. So I've also just posted it in the chat now, but the event is passed. I'm not sure if there's a recording or something we could find out, but it seems to be a very relevant question.
Mm-hmm. Abhijit has his hand up. Please go ahead.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. Oops. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm just switching my device. Yeah, so wonderful question. I think I'd actually love to show you how something like that works. We have been in dominant languages, the switching between translations are super amazing. There's something that we've implemented in Arabic and using this to teach people students early about science and mathematics. And let me just show you.
So I think I'll give you a minute so that we can move on to the other panelists, if that's okay.
Absolutely. So, so it's teaching me a topic on physics in Arabic, and I just gave it a prompt that, hey, can you talk to me in English? And it very immediately switches that. And we've seen this happen across languages and at least in the dominant languages. So with GPT, it has support for 90+ languages, but 16 of them are very good in terms of the results. The rest of them have some issues like any other translator, like Google Translate would also have. In terms of very less known languages, and this is something that Sam Altman spoke when he was here in India, that I think they have built support for most languages, except for languages that are spoken in less than a few 100,000 people. Except for that, they should be able to use across any language. So I think that's the power that has been inbuilt into the system.
Thanks for that, Abhijit. It's very cool to see. And I think it's important to also note what Linda is saying, that with some of the more widely used languages, sure, it might work amazingly. But I imagine in places like Nigeria, where there's 200 local languages, and only 3 are kind of most commonly used on the internet, that is going to be much more difficult. And those are the contexts where we want to use tools like Ikatra, for example. So yeah, there's some work to be done. Thank you. Thank you very much to all our panelists for the session. This first segment, I think, I don't know about all of you, but this is also interesting that I don't actually think I need tea. But if you feel like you need a comfort break, feel free to take one anyway. And we'll carry on the conversation just so that we can have time for the discussions at the end. We are moving to our second segment now, and kicking us off is Alex Robinson. Alexandra is joining us from Denver. I think you're in Denver. I don't know if you're not in Denver today.
Denver.
Okay. So Alex is a tech, data, and social impact strategist committed to advancing equitable, ethical ventures, policies, and products. She brings real-world experience, leading programs, managing tech investments, and conducting evaluation for complex geopolitical environments, such as Ebola-affected West Africa, the Thai seafood industry, the Nepal Gulf labor corridor as well. In addition to 10 years working in the public sector, Alex recently led data privacy and policy and managed engineering teams at an early stage tech startup. She's a trusted advisor to corporate executives, private foundations, government agencies, and nonprofits, including Humanity United, GitHub, and USAID. She has a master's in global crime, justice, and security, and she is the co-author of The State of MERL Tech and Big Data, and featured expert for All Tech is Human. Alex, it's wonderful to have you today. Please go ahead. Oh, so you're still muted, I think.
Here we go. Okay, great. And let me get this on slideshow view. Okay. Hold on 1 second, slide control. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. All right, great. Okay, so part of my job as a data ethicist is to help evaluators and organizations and companies understand the risk, benefits, and threats of the different kinds of tech investments, or even the evaluation models or research initiatives that they are trying to invest in or design. So I'm going to walk through how to apply a risk, benefit, threat assessment process to a generative AI case study. This case study comes closely inspired by my own work with organizations that are increasingly examining how to integrate, or if to integrate, generative AI into their evaluation work or into their social impact work, and that might be facing some pressure from their tech partners to do so. So I'm going to walk you through a process that I've used with my own clients to help them make sense of if generative AI is the right fit for the problems that they're trying to solve. So when we do risk, benefit, threat assessments for evaluation, I like to start with what are the research questions that you're trying to solve? What are the intended outcomes? And what would success look like? So rather than starting with the tools, starting with what are the problems that we're trying to solve? And then looking at, is this solution the right fit? So from there, going into the benefits analysis, taking really close attention to who benefits and if those benefits are equitable. Then looking at risks and threats, and again, looking at who is at risk and are there equity issues between who is benefiting and who is most at risk. And then action planning. So going through everything that you learn, identifying blind spots, identifying if the methodology or the tech solution is really the right fit, if the benefits and risks make sense, and identifying what actions need to be taken in order to move forward or make a decision. So applying this process to generative AI, I found that there are a few things that help adjust a conventional risk benefit threat assessment for evaluation. So again, still starting with the evaluation purpose and needs. Like, it's not about the tool, it's about the problem that you're trying to solve first. But really being conscious about blind spots. So I have increasingly found and believe in my heart that the boldest technologists are those that are able to admit their blind spots, and that can say there are things that we don't know. There are things that we need to figure out before we move forward. And every time I work with a tech team that's able to say, we're not sure if this is the right way to move forward, how can we figure it out? I know that is a team that really cares about using technology well and is likely to come up with a better solution. There are a lot of blind spots in working with generative AI products and evaluation, just with the scale and the ambiguity of potential data flows, data sources, the legal boundaries, the IP issues, privacy. All of these things require us to admit our unknowns. And it's okay that we have unknowns, but we have to put them down on paper and then do our best to find answers. I also like to prepare evaluators to push back against tech vendors, especially when they're being pressured to integrate them in generative AI into their pipelines before really doing risk assessment and understanding if it's the right fit. So that brings us a little bit just to looking at risks and harms. So just on a general level, when evaluating data analytics or research or tech tool itself, we're looking at multiple dimensions of risk. So physical security, so how would data exposure or use of technology lead to physical security issues for community members, for staff, for local partners, the psycho-emotional aspect. So would collecting data in this way or sharing data in a certain way lead to emotional distress, psychological harm, re-traumatization? Social, could use or misuse of data lead someone to be excluded from their community, their family, from any kind of social life? Economic, so deprivation of resources, of job opportunities, and participation in markets. And then political or civil, so would using or misusing data lead to the targeting of individuals or demographically identifiable groups in ways that lead to the deprivation of rights and freedoms, or in ways that exacerbate surveillance? And again, risk to institutions, so reputational. If we use technology or pursue data in this way, because it hurt our organization's reputation, what would that headline be? How could we damage trust with the communities and partners that we're trying to serve? Legal, so this gets a little bit murky with generative AI as well. So are we violating our own internal policies around how we use and share sensitive data? Are we violating privacy laws? It gets really murky with many generative AI solutions. And the law is still evolving quickly and slowly at the same time, depending on if you're in the US or other places that are legislating more around privacy. And financial, so the cost of data security incidents, of risk remediation, of fines, security. So one thing I like to emphasize with teams is that the more data that we amass and aggregate, particularly if we're not really carefully anonymizing or de-identifying data, the more valuable that data becomes as an asset. So there can be kind of a proportional increase in the value of our assets to threat actors as we amass more and more personal data and sensitive data. And then market. So, and this also comes to play with generative AI. So are we, what happens with the data that we input into solutions? Is that becoming part of training data sets? Are we putting IP or sensitive information, institutional information into models that then might hurt our market standing? Those questions can be hard to figure out. And then I look at risks particularly related to analytical models. So bias and discrimination, AI and ML are known in many cases to be built on biased data sets and by biased technologists that are not representative in linguistically, racially, economically, geographically of broader societies. And the biases that we bring into training sets and into the models themselves can reinforce real deep structural inequities in society. So is the way that we are using generative AI and the models that it's built on going to reinforce harms that maybe we as social impact professionals are trying to address in our own work? Then I also like to think about the risk of inaction. So figuring out how to use emerging technology can lead to a sense of paralysis and just being overwhelmed by all of the different questions we have to ask ourselves and all of the unknowns. But is there a comparative risk in not going forward and using something? Is the potential social impact so great and the alternative technology or solution so inefficient that not using that method would be a real missed opportunity for impact? Inaccuracy, so decisions made in a black box with inaccurate, incomplete information, hallucinations, and potentially even hallucinations that lead to cases of libel or other legal and reputational risks. Again, surveillance, so the more data that we're aggregating with increasing precision can lead to the easier identification and tracking and targeting of individuals. And finally, transparency. So with the complexity of models can come a lack of explainability and not knowing precisely or not explaining to our audiences how the analysis and the conclusions that we're making are generating. This can lead to erosion of trust with the stakeholders that we are analyzing data to try and inform strategy. If we can't explain clearly how decisions and conclusions are made, people may be less likely to act on that data because it's confusing and might conflict with their lived experience. And if we can't really explain the models and how those conclusions are made, it's difficult to convince people to use that data for decision making. So I'm going to go through a really quick case study and talk through some of the questions that you could ask yourself if you were in this position. And then if you want to actually go through this and work through it together, you can come to my breakout room after. So let's say that you are the member of a headquarters monitoring, evaluation, and learning team in an organization, and you're always looking for ways to make evaluation more efficient because we've all processed data before and it's about 90% of our jobs. It's not the fun stuff. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of resources. And you want to make use of the data that you have. So you've worked really hard to standardize your survey formats across all of the different countries that you work in. And you're working on this one global program around tuition and school fee assistance for high school students across 40 countries. So you've built out data pipelines in Azure, you're using Azure data lakes, and now you can pull anonymized data from all of the different enterprise MERL platforms that every country team is working in. You can aggregate that structured data and analyze anonymized data to better understand how tuition assistance impacts retention versus dropout rates. So you found some interesting patterns about dropout rates across programs, but you just can't really figure out why certain programs have steeper dropout rates than others. And you've done everything you can with all of your statistical and quantitative and analytics, but you just can't figure it out. So you're Microsoft's client, and recently your Microsoft account representative has encouraged you to integrate ChatGPT into your MERL pipelines. And you could pull open-ended survey responses, internal reports, even external like white papers that discuss evidence around tuition assistance. You could even pull in that like key informant interviews and process that alongside all of your quantitative data. You're not sure if you could preserve participant privacy or identify that unstructured data at scale, but you want to figure it out. So your team also has access to more traditional qualitative out-of-the-box tools. You're not sure if you could efficiently process high volumes of unstructured data, particularly when you don't have a clear research hypothesis to test yet. So this is a really realistic case study where I'm working with teams and organizations that are facing challenges like this, that have done a lot of hard work to automate their data processing and are considering using ChatGPT or other types of market tools, and are even facing pressure from their tech vendors, particularly with big tech vendors like that want to scale and dominate the market, and aren't quite sure what questions they should be asking. So we start with, what are the research and evaluation questions that you're trying to solve? What are the intended purposes? What data would you need to aggregate and analyze and process? What would the technical challenges be? And then really looking into what kinds of sensitive and personal information are contained in those data sources. Would we be violating any internal policies or privacy laws by processing data in a certain way? And then additionally, if data isn't being anonymized, do you know the original informed consent protocols for some of those surveys and participant data? Would processing data in a certain way go beyond the original purposes of informed consent, if informed consent was the legal basis for collecting data, or even if it wasn't? Do you need to notify data subjects? Because every jurisdiction is different, but just because informed consent wasn't the legal basis that you were processing data on, it doesn't mean that data subjects don't still have rights for notice. So then we look at the benefits. So, and benefits for whom? So in this case, the MERL team could really save time, have more efficiency, et cetera. But how do data subjects and program participants benefit from the analysis and from the methodology? How do program teams, how do other local partners, how does the broader field benefit? And on the same token, what about risks and threat actors? So here we could just, for example, think that by amassing that much personal information, and I think it's still questionable whether narrative interviews can really be anonymized depending on context. So if you are amassing that much data, some of which could reveal people's identities, are you increasing the value of your organization as a target to conflict actors, to state actors, et cetera? And then we want to look at what can be done to prevent risks and reduce their severity, and what data points put that stakeholder group at the highest risk. So those questions help us minimize data. And then we go back through and we look through, do the benefits outweigh the risks, and for whom? Who benefits and who is most likely to experience negative repercussions if that data is used or misused. We also look at comparative benefits and fit. So how do the risks and benefits of using that methodology, that technology, compare to alternatives? And we look at our blind spot. So as we go back through our risk assessment and benefit analysis, we want to pay attention to whose voices weren't involved in assessing risks, because likely some of the groups that are at risk or opposed to benefit aren't in the room when we're making that analysis. And we also probably have questions that are unanswered. So the thornier questions around privacy, around policy, that we want to be prepared to ask tech vendors and to assess their responses. So how will we address that?
Just a 1 minute warning.
Oh, okay, great. And data minimization and risk mitigation. So what do we need to do to move forward responsibly and ethically? Is it ethical to move forward, and can risk be minimized to a degree that we feel comfortable moving forward? And then finally, I always like to ensure that we leave the room with actions, with justifications for those actions, for who is responsible for taking them forward, and when those actions need to be completed. I find that these conversations around risk and benefits can be really overwhelming and feel existential. So getting pen to paper around like what are the blind spot questions that I need to address before I can start this analysis? Like, what policies do I need to review? And breaking things down into tangible actions can help the process feel a little bit less overwhelming. And that's it. So if you want to practice this or talk about it, or talk about questions in your own evaluation that you're wrestling with, then I'd love to talk to you in the breakout room, or feel free to email me. So thanks so much.
This was super. Thank you, Alex. Very, very interesting, and I love this technical. Thank you. I could follow that one easier than the others. And I think it's something, you're right to end with a call to action. It is something that we often kind of leave as a hanging question in our minds, right? And I think something I've been thinking about a lot is how, as evaluators, we don't always have the resources to go back to our beneficiaries with our findings. But that's a validation step that might help to kind of perpetuate our biases less. Yeah, this is really useful. Thank you. Please do put questions in the chat. We are going to move straight on to our last talk of the day, which is going to be given by Steve Powell. And Steve, as you get ready, I'll just introduce you. So Steve is going to be talking about audit interviewing with Story Survey, and it's an app that he's developed, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that. It's going to be an interesting talk, I'm sure. He's got 25 years of experience in research and evaluation, spanning projects on a wide range of topics, from psychosocial programming after disasters to social capital in the former Soviet Union. He holds a PhD in psychology. He's fascinated with causal mapping and is the co-founder of Promente Social Research in Sarajevo, as well as the co-founder and director of Causal Map Limited. I will hand over to you now, Steve. Please go ahead.
Hi, hi everyone. Can you hear me fine? Yeah, looks like you can, but you're muted, but I'll take that as a yes. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Mutsa, for that kind introduction. And hello, everybody. I'll try not to be too technical today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Story Survey, which is an app we've built, but also the really interesting part, I think, is more generally what AI can mean for qualitative research in general and evaluation research. I think it's really exciting beyond just like, you know, ChatGPT is amazing. You can ask it questions, but I think it's a revolution in qualitative sciences. And it's going to be very interesting for evaluation, quite apart from all of the sort of drawbacks and dangers and threats that Alexandra was just talking about, which are all totally valid. They don't make them less valid, but it's also good to be excited by just what's so exciting about it too. So can robots do good qualitative interviews? So where I come to this from in the recent past is working together with Bath Social and Development Research in the UK, a thing called QIP, the Qualitative Impact Protocol, which you might have heard of, which is a way of doing a very qualitative kind of impact analysis, which involves basically quite intensive interviews with stakeholders, for example, intended beneficiaries of some kind of development initiative, often it is, about kind of their version of events and what they think causes what in their world, in the hope of maybe picking up stories about how some intervention maybe led to some change in their lives, but in a very open way. And so I bumped into Fiona and James from Bath SDR a couple of 2-3 years ago, and they had a challenge about how to visualize and analyze and aggregate all of this causal data, which was something that also had been sort of I've been working on for years really, about how to do this. And it led to a tiny startup called Causal Map, which is where I work now. And the next slide will just give you, not that one. This next slide will give you a little idea of the kind of things that we do. So we can collect stories from maybe 24 people and aggregate them in a very qualitative way, like qualitative data analysis, like using NVivo, that kind of tool. Causal Map, the app, is a tool, something like NVivo. And in the end, you get a picture something like this, which is, or many pictures, something like this, which is kind of mapping, analyzing the causal content of people's stories, saying in the end, there's, oh goodness, yes, in fact, our cash transfer perhaps led in some way indirectly to increased income for people. So that's the background. But it's, as you can guess, it's hard work doing all these interviews. You know, it can cost a lot of money and time just to do the right kind of interview in the right kind of way with maybe 12 or 24 people in one, or often nowadays it's 2 or 3 different countries. It's expensive and time consuming, although of course it's very interesting. And when actually 2 years ago, we were already working on a kind of a bot to see if we could automate interviewing via the internet. And it's nearly getting on for 3 years now. And of course, in November, ChatGPT blew all of that out of the water. So we had to put all of those plans in the bin and start all over again with what we can do with ChatGPT to lead our interviews for us, with the idea that we could have an online interviewing robot, which basically asks the questions that we want to ask in a scalable way. So we always talk about scalability because we always think you still have to start off with some face-to-face interviews because you have to know what it feels like and what it's like for the people. And then when you've got your interview kind of right, then you can scale that by, why not click a button and maybe 100 people can take part in the same interview. That's the idea anyway. It's easy. It turned out in November last year, it says, oh goodness, you can just ask ChatGPT to start an interview. And with a bit of tweaking, this is like a kind of fun, with this kind of prompt, you can make it start a psychotherapy session for you. But maybe you could do something useful with it, like asking you about your experiences with a project or problems you had, or in our case, a causal story. So tell me some major outcomes in your life and what led to them and what led to those things, or what were the causes of the causes and so forth. So I've spent 6 months doing not much else as one of our 2 or 3 major projects to make this story survey thing work again. And we're on version like 106 now. Or I mean, Story Survey 4 at least. There's been a lot of different versions. It's still work in progress. It's free to use at the moment, at least for testing. If you're interested, then get in touch or come to the breakout room later. It uses the OpenAI API, so the kind of automated version of ChatGPT. It'll work in any world language. Basically, what you do is you make up your own script for an interview, which is pretty much exactly the same as you'd give to like a postgraduate assistant. In order to tell them how to conduct the interview, you do pretty much the same with ChatGPT. Getting it exactly right has been the voyage of many months, but basically, you just give it a script like the one on the previous page and just say, go ahead and do the interview. You can use it for anything, and more we're interested in the idea of using this kind of approach for any kind of semi-structured qualitative interview, not just the causal ones that we're most interested in. And we're interested in working on a library of different sort of prompts that evaluate, or scripts that evaluators could use, like what would be a good script to start an outcome harvesting interview, or a QIP interview, or a most significant change interview. In fact, we've done this now on a small scale. We use, it works okay in 3.5. I mean, I always say to people, like 3.5 is like having a really good secondary school assistant working for you. And GPT-4 is like having a postgraduate assistant working for you. For some tasks, it's exactly the same, or the secondary school assistant might be faster. For other tasks, forget it, you need your GPT-4 interviewer. Now, it depends exactly what you're trying to find out and how. It's expensive. That's a big problem with this. So we'd like to say, oh, the whole world can use this now and everyone can just make their own surveys. But as has been mentioned already, it's there's a lot of data going backwards and forwards, because you kind of think you're only adding a question and an answer each time, but actually you're sending the entire history of the interview backwards and forwards every time that your respondent kind of clicks on the button. So it's not cheap at all, and it can cost, like with GPT-4, I don't know, 100 respondents is going to cost something like $20 or something like that. So it's a lot of money. With 3.5, it's considerably cheaper. We always use zero temperature, as has been mentioned before, because we want the interviewer to do the same thing every time. And it's not without its problems. It's still the case sometimes that the OpenAI API itself has just sort of frozen up, even though we do various workarounds to try and avoid that happening. And also, you can't have that many surveys at once, because you will reach your own tokens per minute limit, which OpenAI puts on you. So you just can't have that many interviews going on at once. At the same time, unfortunately, you have to kind of slow everything down in order for it to work. So when we're working with someone to do an interview like this, the most important thing, as always, is like, what do you actually want to find out? Because you could just do like some kind of SurveyMonkey survey and ask like a load of closed questions and some open questions, like, did you enjoy the training, or something like that. And there's no point using a qualitative interview just to find out if someone enjoyed the training, like, or not, or something like that. The point of a qualitative interview is to explore and expand. So qualitative, causal interviewing is a good example. You want to know, like, what do people think were the reasons for that, and what were the reasons for the reasons, and why, and what were the blockers, and what helped and what hindered. That's the kind of thing that you can explore nicely with a qualitative interview, and you can tell the OpenAI API, or ChatGPT, if you like, to conduct an interview like that. Most people like it. We find that people don't want to click on the link. People hate surveys anyway, right? And people are suspicious of the idea. We found so far, we've had quite a low response rate when people are told in an email, click on this link and you can go and be interviewed by a robot. Some people are intrigued by it. The people who do it say it's amazing, oh, it's such fun, it's really enjoyable. But we've perhaps got to find a different way of sort of like marketing it, because at the moment the response rate is quite low. So we have obviously there's a web-based kind of dashboard for creating your script, which should be based ideally on face-to-face interviews I've already tried. But this is the kind of thing that you might see in the script. There's a bit more to it than that, but it's not just the prompt, but that's basically what's going on. And so you adapt your script and then you test your interview. And this is a little GIF from the site itself. So this is GPT-4. And and it's very good at, within this case, we wanted to look at the human factors which are contributing to the success or failure of a project at work. And I mean, it's postgraduate level. I mean, you can give it the interviewer your hypotheses a bit and what you'd like it to explore and the kind of way it would like to explore different things. And it's very professional. You can also build in things like safeguarding concerns, or you can get it to say things like, that sounds like, is that an issue you think I should flag? Should I get in touch with someone about this? Would you like me to stop? Is that too difficult for you? Do you want to move on if you get bored? All those kinds of things you can build in. In fact, are built into the sort of underlying logic of the app. You don't have to do that yourself if you're creating an interview. So it's indistinguishable, I'm sure, from a professional interview. It's maybe not as funny and or as human. You can make it quite human. You can make it really chatty if you want to. Personally, I think that's not a good idea, but people tend to enjoy it anyway. So here's a couple of, please don't click on them now, because then what will happen is if you get 20 people at once clicking on these links, I mean, you can't click on them anyway, but try and type them into your browser. Because if you get, like I say, more than about 10 or 15 at the same time, then it just all freezes up, because we very quickly reach the tokens per minute limit. But these are, yes, this is an interesting example of, there's a GPT-4 and a GPT 3.5 version of this interview, and it's really interesting to compare the difference. So it's all very well. So you then have, so what are you going to do? So you're going to get like an interview, some text. So what do you do? So one thing you can do is you can ask for a summary. So I like this. So you can get the interviewer at the end to say, very interesting, thank you very much. What I've understood was this. And the interviewer then summarizes again the main points and says, have I got it right, or do you want me to correct something? And then the interviewee can then say, oh, no, it's not true. I didn't say that. Mostly it doesn't. Mostly it is an amazing summary, but there's a good opportunity there to check that everything's correct. And if you like, you can then just already use just those summaries for your analysis, which is already kind of a step forward in terms of having useful results. But it's also possible to steer the interview live. So we're looking for causal information most of the time. So we can get the bot to say, that sounds like you're making a link from X to Y, and it prints it out in a certain format. You can even get it to like produce a diagram as we go along. And that's the way we started actually with this approach, was to sort of do the summary or to produce the results during the interview, so that then as the person who's created the interview, you can just then download your map or your summary or Excel table, whatever it is that's being built up during the interview. At the moment, we're moving more towards simply having the text transcript of the interview, and then analyzing that later in whatever technique you want to use. So it could be simply a AI-powered thematic interview, thematic analysis, or it could be a causal analysis. And this works also very well, because the interviewer has already been hopefully asking the kind of question you want to get asked in the kind of way. So hopefully the interview transcript is really rich in the kind of data that you want. And actually, I was comparing this. I did like 20 interviews for a Middle Eastern project recently, and then got another 10 using this technology. And as a human, it does take you a long time to get to the point. I was looking at my transcripts, and in some ways I prefer what the robot did to what I did. I think the sort of more actionable information in a shorter space of time than all the sort of chat that I did. Of course, you need the chat too for some things. So here's an example of, it's just an example of a one paragraph summary I was talking about before, that the robot prints out at the end of the interview and then checks with the interviewee, is that what they meant? And in most cases, yes, it was pretty correct. And here's an example of a different kind of summary, where we're using this fixed format with these double arrows, where the interviewer is supposed to be looking for causal connections and repeats back, like a good listener, repeats back to the interviewee what the causal links are that they think the person had said. And that works also really nicely. And the respondents tend to understand this format, and if there's something wrong, then they correct it. Yeah, I already mentioned GPT-4. It's colossally better for certain things, sort of like grown-up tasks, but for sort of quick and cheerful interviews, GPT 3.5 is fine as well, with a little bit of tweaking. But here's what really interests me about this is Story Serve is just an example. We're also working on, or we have an app called Causal Map, which has been in the past for manual coding of interviews to extract causal information. Humans do it, and we're now having a lot of success in doing that using AI. But what interests me is what's this going to mean for qualitative sciences, which of course have always been the sort of poor cousin of quantitative sciences, and oh, it's so unreliable and it's so subjective and it depends on the humans and it's so expensive and it's not scalable and so forth. But I think using AI tools in these ways, bearing in mind all the caveats that Alexandra already mentioned, is going to be a revolution. It's going to mean a revolution in the way that we extract data about people, about the human world, because you can do it on a scale where you can talk about representative samples. We've never been able to do that before because it's always too expensive. You can do it in a reliable way. So bearing in mind the specific biases, I guess, of the robot in the same way that human interviewers also have their own specific biases, at least it's a repeatable bias. And it's a bias that's going to come up the same every time. So you can get the bot asking the same interview to the same person will come up with the same results each time, assuming the human stays constant. So you can do it in a way which is reproducible at scale. You can do comparisons across time and place. You can use it for baseline endline analysis. You can use it for monitoring during a project lifetime and do a comparison of a summary, an AI summary, thematic summary of what the people said before, during, and after. And if you've got both a bot doing the interviewing, like I just demonstrated, and another AI doing the analysis, and you've got obviously it's not going to be completely automated. There's always a role for humans here, which, especially in the analysis, which I won't get into now. But basically you've got a surveyable technique of getting qualitative information for people. So it's emerging themes, it's open to new information, it can re-understand the world in the way that respondents are now thinking about it, different from what you planned at baseline. All of these things, which qualitative is great at, but was never really enough because it was always too slow, too expensive, etc. We can now do that, so we can have much more adaptive, much more human-based storytelling type evaluation and monitoring techniques, which are, like I say, which are peers, if you like, with quantitative sciences, because you can do it in a reliable and even a valid way. You can start to talk about validity and do it at scale in a way that no one could imagine, 7 months ago, which is amazing. I mean, science, the social sciences have just changed overnight, as far as I'm concerned. It's a new world we're living in. So yeah, and the really exciting thing is that 1 minute.
Yep, 1
Great.
minute.
Perfect. So what's great about it is that the prompt, or what we call a script, is the creative part, and you, the human, think this up, and everything else just goes on automatically. Your automated postgraduate researchers go off and do it for you. And so it's like it's the program, if you like. It's the program for your piece of work, for your piece of research. But the great thing about the program is it's not expressed in SPSS or Excel or R or something. It's expressed in natural language, your own language, whatever that is, in a way which you can basically plug that prompt into the same system somewhere else and you get the same results. So this is what makes it so beautifully reproducible and in a way explainable as well. So somebody can understand what it is that you were doing in a way that you couldn't even with most quantitative approaches. So the prompt is both the description of what you want to do and the program itself that actually makes it work. That's amazing. So it's work in story survey. It's a work in progress. There are 2 codes there to, like I say, it'd be not great if not everyone goes and tries them right now, but maybe in a few minutes if you're interested. The top one is the work with a 3.5 version, so a little bit more primitive version of the automated survey about work experiences on a project at work. And the bottom of the QR codes is a form where you can sign up if you're interested in using Story Survey to help us with the testing and to get real results, which is free. Then that's the thing to click on. And also I'll hang around in the breakout rooms if you're interested in joining that. So thanks very much, everyone, and Mutsa especially.
Thank you, Steve. That was really interesting. Yeah, it's cool to see that you can combine a bot and an AI tool. I think it's just, I don't know, I guess I've never thought of doing that. And I think, one of the things that I would probably still wonder about is what the trade-off between having that temperature 0 to get kind of a standard output versus temperature 1 to get a more creative, more informed, more consolidated response would be. But, over time, I guess we will see how that plays out. Thank you. There isn't a question in the chat, and I know that we're on time. So what I'm going to do is just quickly pulse check with our speakers if they are willing to stick around and host a room. And then perhaps if you do want to chat to the speakers, you can, if they have the extra 5 minutes. So I'll just go around. Alex, are you okay to stick around for 5 more minutes?
I can do 5 more minutes and then I have to jump. Okay,
great. And Steve?
Yeah, about the same. 5 or 10 is good.
Abhijit? Good. And Sean?
Yeah, sure. Fine with me.
All right. And Solomon?
That's okay. That's okay.
Thank you. Okay, so Nolitando, please go ahead and create 5 rooms for each of our speakers. I'll just quickly show their names on the screen, and feel free to jump into any of those rooms. You will have the option to get into a room.
Just confirm the number necessary is 5, right?
5 rooms, please. Yes.
Okay, awesome. You'll indicate then if I should open or it's okay now if I do so.
Yes, you can go ahead and open, and I'm going to share my screen so people can see who's in what room, and so the speakers also know which room to go into. So I hope you can see Steve, you would be going into room number 1, Alex number 2, Sean number 3, Abhijit number 4, Solomon number 5. And before you all go off, thank you very much for showing up today. It was really great to have you and have you contribute to this discussion. Please join the Slack channel. We'll share instructions on how you can do that so that we can continue these conversations and see if we can also work together on some of the projects that we all have going on. And cheers, everybody. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mutsa.
Thanks, Nalu. We can see the rooms.
Awesome, Mutsa.
Okay, if you're still on the call and you want to have a chance to talk to one of the speakers, you can choose the room that you'd like to go into. Sean is in room 3. And he was talking about Monic. Welcome back. Thank you. Oh, I think you guys are muted.
Okay, I see everybody's coming back.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, great. Thanks for sticking around. I hope that you all had good chats in there. I will follow up with everybody who attended. We'd love to know what your experience was and convince you to join Slack. So Slack is what we're using to continue conversations. It feels very much like an office, like you're talking to somebody sitting next to you, which is great for collaboration. So we'll be really happy to see you there until our next COP. Many thanks to our speakers who presented today. That was really insightful and inspiring. And we hope that we will have more of these opportunities to further these conversations. Until next time, take care, everybody, and thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Matsa.
Thanks, Mutsa. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Solomon. Bye, Abhijit.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Good talking. Thank you.
Bye, Nicholas. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Steve. Wait.